Czechoslovakia was a sovereign state in Central Europe that existed from October 1918, when it declared its independence from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, until its peaceful dissolution into the Czech Republic and Slovakia on 1 January 1993. From 1939 to 1945, following its forced division and partial incorporation into Nazi Germany, the state did not de facto exist, but its government in exile continued to operate. On June 29, 1945, a treaty was signed between Czechoslovakia and the Soviet Union, ceding Carpatho-Ukraine to the USSR. From 1948 to 1990, Czechoslovakia had a command or planned economy, which was disintegrated on January 1, 1991, removing price controls after a period of preparation. Basic characteristics. Form of state, 1918 a Euro 1938, a democratic republic. 1938 a Euro 1939, after annexation of Sudetenland by Germany in 1938, the region gradually turned into a state with loosened connections among the Czech, Slovak, and Ruthenian parts. A large strip of southern Slovakia and Carpatho-Ukraine was annexed by Hungary, and the Zaolzie region was annexed by Poland. 1939 a Euro 1945, the region split into the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia and the Slovak Republic. A government in exile continued to exist in London, supported by the United Kingdom, United States and its allies. After the German invasion of Russia, it was also recognized by the USSR. Czechoslovakia adhered to the declaration by United Nations and was a founding member of the United Nations. 1946 a Euro 1948, the country was governed by a coalition government with communist ministers, including the Prime Minister and the Minister of Interior. Carpathian Ruthenia was ceded to the USSR. 1948 a Euro 1989, the country became a communist state with a centrally planned economy. In 1960, the country officially became a socialist republic. 1969 a Euro 1990, the Federal Republic consisted of the Czech Socialist Republic and the Slovak Socialist Republic. 1990 a Euro 1992, the Federal Democratic Republic consisted of the Czech Republic and the Slovak Republic. Neighbors, Austria 1918 a Euro 1938, 1945 a Euro 1992, Germany, Hungary, Poland, Romania 1918 a Euro 1938, Soviet Union 1945 a Euro 1991, Ukraine 1991 a Euro 1992. Topography, the country was of generally irregular terrain. The western area was part of the north-central European uplands. The eastern region was composed of the northern reaches of the Carpathian Mountains and lands of the Danube River basin. Climate, the weather was predominantly continental, but varied from the moderate temperature of Western Europe in the west, to the more severe weather of Eastern Europe and the Western Soviet Union in the east. Official names: 1918 a Euro 1920, Republic of Czechoslovakia Czechoslovak State, or Czechoslovakia Czechoslovakia, 1920 a Euro 1938, Czechoslovak Republic, or Czechoslovakia, 1938 a Euro 1939, Czechoslovak Republic, or Czechoslovakia. 1945 a Euro 1960, Czechoslovak Republic, or Czechoslovakia, 1960 a Euro 1990, Czechoslovak Socialist Republic, or Czechoslovakia. April 1990, Czechoslovak Federative Republic and Czechoslovak Federative Republic. The country subsequently became the Czech and Slovak Federative Republic, AOESFR, or Česko-Slovensko and Česko-Slovensko. History. Foundation, origins. The area was long a part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire until the empire collapsed at the end of World War I. The new state was founded by Tomaso Garrick Masaryk, who served as its first president from November 14, 1918 to December 14, 1935. He was succeeded by his close ally, Edvard Beneš. The roots of Czech nationalism go back to the 19th century, when philologists and educators, influenced by Romanticism, promoted the Czech language and pride in the Czech people. Nationalism became a mass movement in the last half of the 19th century. taking advantage of the opportunities for limited participation in political life available under the Austrian rule. Czech leaders such as historian František Palaka founded many patriotic, self-help organizations which provided a chance for many of their compatriots to participate in communal life prior to independence. At first, Palaka supported Austro-Slavism and worked for reorganized and federal Austrian Empire, which would protect Middle European people against Russian and German threats. The failure of the Revolution of 1848, however, crushed his hopes for Austro-Slavism. An advocate of democratic reform and Czech autonomy within Austria-Hungary, Masaryk was elected twice to Reichsrat, the first time being from 1891 to 1893 in the Young Czech Party and again from 1907 to 1914 in the Czech Realist Party, which he founded in 1889 with Karel Kramer Soam registered trademark and Josef Kaizl. During World War I, small numbers of Czechs, the Czechoslovak legions, fought with the Allies in France and Italy, while large numbers deserted to Russia, in exchange for their support for the independence of Czechoslovakia from the Austrian Empire. With the outbreak of World War I, Masaryk began working for Czech independence in union with Slovakia. With Edvard Benia and Milan Rastislav Angstrom Tefernik, Masaryk visited several Western countries and won support from influential publicists. Bohemia and Moravia, under Austrian rule, were Czech-speaking industrial centers, while Slovakia, which was part of Hungary, was an undeveloped agrarian region. Conditions were much better for the development of the mass national movement in the Czech lands than in Slovakia. Nevertheless, the two regions united and created a new nation. Founding. The Bohemian Kingdom officially ceased to exist in 1918 by transformation into Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia was founded in October 1918, as one of the successor states of Austro-Hungarian Empire at the end of World War I and as part of the Treaty of Saint-Germain. It consisted of the present-day territories of the Bohemia, Moravia, Slovakia and Carpathian Ruthenia. Its territory included some of the most industrialized regions of the former Austria-Hungary. Ethnicity, the new country was a multi-ethnic state. The population consisted of Czechs, Slovaks, Germans, Hungarians and Rusines. Many of the Germans, Hungarians, Ruthenians and Poles and some Slovaks, felt oppressed because the political elite did not generally allow political autonomy for minority ethnic groups. This policy, combined with increasing Nazi propaganda especially in the industrialized German-speaking Sudetenland, led to unrest among the non-Czech population. The state proclaimed the official ideology that there are no Czechs and Slovaks, but only one nation of Czechoslovaks, to the disagreement of Slovaks and other ethnic groups. Once a unified Czechoslovakia was restored after World War II, the conflict between the Czechs and the Slovaks surfaced again. The governments of Czechoslovakia and other Eastern European nations deported ethnic Germans to the west, reducing the presence of minorities in the nation. Most of the Jews had been killed during the war by the Nazis and their allies. Interwar, the period between the two world wars saw the flowering of democracy in Czechoslovakia. Of all the new states established in Central Europe after 1918, only Czechoslovakia preserved a democratic government until the war broke out. The persistence of democracy suggests that Czechoslovakia was better prepared to maintain democracy than were other countries in the region. Thus, despite regional disparities, its level of development was much higher than that of neighboring states. The population was generally literate, and contained fewer alienated groups. The influence of these conditions was augmented by the political values of Czechoslovakia's leaders and the policies they adopted. Under Masaryk, Czech and Slovak politicians promoted progressive social and economic conditions that served to diffuse discontent. Foreign Minister Benia became the prime architect of the Czechoslovak-Romanian-Yugoslav alliance directed against Hungarian attempts to reclaim lost areas. Benia worked closely with France. Far more dangerous was the German element, which after 1933 became allied with the Nazis in Germany. The increasing feeling of inferiority among the Slovaks, who were hostile to the more numerous Czechs, weakened the country in the late 1930s. many Slovaks supported an extreme nationalist movement and welcomed the puppet Slovak state set up under Hitler's control in 1939. After 1933, Czechoslovakia remained the only democracy in Central and Eastern Europe. Munich betrayal and German occupation. In 1938, Adolf Hitler demanded control of the Sudetenland. Britain and France ceded control and the appeasement at the Munich Conference, ignoring the military alliance Czechoslovakia had with France. In 1939, the remainder of Czechoslovakia was invaded by Nazi Germany and divided into the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia and the puppet Slovak state. Much of Slovakia and all of Subcarpathian Ruthenia were annexed by Hungary. Poland occupied Zaolzie, an area with Polish minority, in October 1938. The eventual goal of the German state under Nazi leadership was to eradicate Czech nationality through assimilation, deportation, and extermination of the Czech intelligentsia. The intellectual elites and middle class made up a considerable number of the 200,000 people who passed through concentration camps and the 250,000 who died during German occupation. Under Generalplan Ost, it was assumed that around 50% Czechs would be fit for Germanization. The Czech intellectual elites were to be removed not only from Czech territories but from Europe completely. The authors of Generalplan Ost believed it would be best if they emigrated overseas, as even in Siberia they were considered a threat to German rule. Just like Jews, Poles, Serbs, and several other nations, Czechs were considered to be unto-mention by the Nazi state. The deportation of Jews to concentration camps was organized under the direction of Reinhard Heydrich, and the fortress town of Tereza N was made into a ghetto way station for Jewish families. On June 4, 1942, Heydrich died after being wounded by an assassin in Operation Anthropoid. Heydrich's successor, Colonel General Kurt Daluege, ordered mass arrests and executions and the destruction of the villages of Lidis and Lee 3/4 AKY. In 1943 the German war effort was accelerated. Under the authority of Karl Hermann Frank, German Minister of State for Bohemia and Moravia, some 350,000 Czech laborers were dispatched to the Reich. Within the Protectorate, all non-war-related industry was prohibited. Most of the Czech population obeyed quiescently up until the final months preceding the end of the war, while thousands were involved in the resistance movement. For the Czechs of the Protectorate Bohemia and Moravia, German occupation was a period of brutal oppression. Czech losses resulting from political persecution and deaths in concentration camps totaled between 36,000 and 55,000. The Jewish population of Bohemia and Moravia was virtually annihilated. Many Jews emigrated after 1939. More than 70,000 were killed. 8,000 survived at Tereza N. Several thousand Jews managed to live in freedom or in hiding throughout the occupation. Despite the estimated 136,000 deaths at the hands of the Nazi regime, the population in the Reichsprotectorate saw a net increase during the war years of approximately 250,000 in line with an increased birth rate. On May 9, 1945, Soviet Red Army troops entered Prague. Communist Czechoslovakia. After World War II, pre-war Czechoslovakia was re-established, with the exception of Subcarpathian Ruthenia, which was annexed by the Soviet Union and incorporated into the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. The Benia decrees were promulgated concerning ethnic Germans and ethnic Hungarians. Under the decrees, citizenship was abrogated for people of German and Hungarian ethnic origin, who had accepted German or Hungarian citizenship during the occupations. In 1948, this provision was cancelled for the Hungarians, but only partially for the Germans. The government then confiscated the property of the Germans and expelled about 90% of the ethnic German population, over 2 million people. Those who remained were collectively accused of supporting the Nazis after the Munich Agreement, as 97.32% of Sudeten Germans voted for the NSDAP in the December 1938 elections. Almost every decree explicitly stated that the sanctions did not apply to anti-fascists. Some 250,000 Germans, many married to Czechs, some anti-fascists, and also those required for the post-war reconstruction of the country, remained in Czechoslovakia. The Benia decree still causes controversy among nationalist groups in the Czech Republic, Germany, Austria and Hungary. Carpathian Ruthenia was occupied by the Soviet Union. In the 1946 parliamentary election, the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia was the winner in the Czech lands, and the Democratic Party won in Slovakia. In February 1948 the Communists seized power. Although they would maintain the fiction of political pluralism through the existence of the National Front, except for a short period in the late 1960s the country was characterized by the absence of liberal democracy. Since citizens lacked significant electoral methods of registering protest against government policies, periodically there were street protests that became violent. Such was the case in the town of Plzea, where riots occurred in 1953, reflecting economic discontent. Police and army units put down the rebellion, and hundreds were injured but no one was killed. The director of the United States unregistered trademark Central Intelligence Agency, Alan W. Dulles, was subsequently recorded as having told an associate in a private conversation, the horrible thing in the Czechoslovakian thing was that nobody got killed. Unregistered trademark D have felt much better about that, and the Czechoslovakian people would have stood much higher in the world unregistered trademark S estimation, if there had been 1,000 or 10,000 people killed in that. We kill more people on the roads every day for no purpose while its economy remained more advanced than those of its neighbors in Eastern Europe, Czechoslovakia grew increasingly economically weak relative to Western Europe. In 1968, when the reformer Alexander Dubček was appointed to the key post of first secretary of the Czechoslovak Communist Party, there was a brief period of liberalization known as the Prague Spring. In response, after failing to persuade the Czechoslovak leaders to change course, 5 other Eastern Bloc members of the Warsaw Pact invaded. Soviet tanks rolled into Czechoslovakia on the night of August 21, 1968. The General Secretary of the Soviet Communist Party Leonid Brezhnev viewed this intervention as vital to the preservation of the Soviet, socialist system and vowed to intervene in any state that sought to replace Marxism-Leninism with capitalism. In the week after the invasion there was a spontaneous campaign of civil resistance against the occupation. This resistance involved a wide range of acts of non-cooperation and defiance. This was followed by a period in which the Czechoslovak Communist Party leadership, having been forced in Moscow to make concessions to the Soviet Union, gradually put the brakes on their earlier liberal policies. In April 1969 Dubček was finally dismissed from the first secretaryship of the Czechoslovak Communist Party. Meanwhile, one plank of the reform program had been carried out. In 1968 September, Czechoslovakia was turned into a federation of the Czech Socialist Republic and Slovak Socialist Republic. The theory was that under the federation, social and economic inequities between the Czech and Slovak halves of the state would be largely eliminated. A number of ministries, such as education, now became 2 formally equal bodies in the 2 formally equal republics. However, the centralized political control by the Czechoslovak Communist Party severely limited the effects of federalization. The 1970s saw the rise of the dissident movement in Czechoslovakia, represented among others by Václav Havel. The movement sought greater political participation and expression in the face of official disapproval, manifested in limitations on work activities, which went as far as a ban on professional employment, the refusal of higher education for the dissidents' children, police harassment and prison. After 1989. In 1989, the Velvet Revolution restored democracy. This occurred at around the same time as the fall of communism in Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary and Poland. Within 3 years communist rule was extirpated from Europe. Unlike Yugoslavia and the Soviet Union, the end of communism in this country did not automatically mean the end of the communist name. The word socialist was removed from the name on March 29, 1990 and replaced by federal. In 1992, because of growing nationalist tensions in the government, Czechoslovakia was peacefully dissolved by parliament. On January 1, 1993 it formally separated into 2 independent countries, the Czech Republic and the Slovak Republic. Heads of state and government. List of presidents of Czechoslovakia, list of prime ministers of Czechoslovakia, foreign policy, international agreements and membership. In the 1930s, the nation formed a military alliance with France, which collapsed in the Munich Agreement of 1938. After World War II, active participant in Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, Warsaw Pact, United Nations and its specialized agencies. Signatory of Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe. Administrative divisions. 1918 Euro 1923, different systems in former Austrian territory compared to former Hungarian territory, 3 lands, Bohemia, Moravia, Silesia, plus 21 counties in today's Slovakia and 3 counties in today's Ruthenia. Both lands and counties were divided into districts. 1923 Euro 1927, as above, except that the Slovak and Ruthenian counties were replaced by 6 counties at 3/4 up, in Slovakia and 1 county in Ruthenia, and the numbers and boundaries of the okresy were changed in those 2 territories. 1928 Euro 1938, 4 lands, Bohemia, Moravia Silesia, Slovakia and Subcarpathian Ruthenia, divided into districts. Late 1938 Euro March 1939, as above, but Slovakia and Ruthenia gained the status of autonomous lands. 1945 Euro 1948, as in 1928 Euro 1938, except that Ruthenia became part of the Soviet Union. 1949 Euro 1960, 19 regions divided into 270 okresy. 1960 Euro 1992, 10 Kraj, Prague, and Bratislava. These were divided into 109 Euro 114 okresy. The Kraj were abolished temporarily in Slovakia in 1969 Euro 1970 and for many purposes from 1991 in Czechoslovakia. In addition, the Czech Socialist Republic and the Slovak Socialist Republic were established in 1969. Population and ethnic groups. Politics. After World War II, a political monopoly was held by the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia. Gustav E. Husák was elected first secretary of the KSC in 1969 and president of Czechoslovakia in 1975. Other parties and organizations existed but functioned in subordinate roles to the KSC. All political parties, as well as numerous mass organizations, were grouped under umbrella of the National Front. Human rights activists and religious activists were severely repressed. Constitutional development. Czechoslovakia had the following constitutions during its history: Temporary Constitution of November 14, 1918, see History of Czechoslovakia, the 1920 Constitution, democratic, in force until 1948, several amendments, the Communist 1948 9th of May Constitution, the Communist 1960 Constitution of the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic with major amendments in 1968, 1971, 1975, 1978, and 1989. It was amended several more times during 1990 Euro 1992. Economy. After World War II, the economy was centrally planned, with command links controlled by the Communist Party, similarly to the Soviet Union. The large metallurgical industry was dependent on imports of iron and non-ferrous ores. Industry, extractive industry and manufacturing dominated the sector, including machinery, chemicals, food processing, metallurgy, and textiles. The sector was wasteful in its use of energy, materials, and labor and was slow to upgrade technology, but the country was a major supplier of high-quality machinery, instruments, electronics, aircraft, airplane engines and arms to other socialist countries. Agriculture. Agriculture was a minor sector, but collectivized farms of large acreage and relatively efficient mode of production enabled the country to be relatively self-sufficient in food supply. The country depended on imports of grains in years of adverse weather. Meat production was constrained by shortage of feed, but the country still recorded high per capita consumption of meat. Foreign trade, exports were estimated at $17.8 billion in 1985. Exports were machinery, fuel and materials, and manufactured consumer goods. Imports stood at estimated $17.9 billion in 1985, including fuel and materials, machinery, and agricultural and forestry products. In 1986, about 80% of foreign trade was with other socialist countries. Exchange rate, official, or commercial, rate was crowns 5.4 per $1 in 1987. Tourist, or non-commercial, rate was KWS 10.5 per $1. Neither rate reflected purchasing power. The exchange rate on the black market was around KWS 30 per $1, which became the official rate once the currency became convertible in the early 1990s. Fiscal year, calendar year. Fiscal policy, the state was the exclusive owner of means of production in most cases. Revenue from state enterprises was the primary source of revenues, followed by turnover tax. The government spent heavily on social programs, subsidies, and investment. Budget was usually balanced or left small surplus. Resource base. After World War II, the country was short of energy, relying on imported crude oil and natural gas from Soviet Union, domestic brown coal, and nuclear and hydroelectric energy. Energy constraints a major factor in the 1980s. Transport and communications. Society. Education. Education was free at all levels and compulsory from age 6 to 15. The vast majority of the population was literate. There was a highly developed system of apprenticeship training, and vocational schools supplemented general secondary schools and institutions of higher education. Religion. In 1991, Roman Catholics 46%, Evangelical Lutheran 5.3%, Atheists 30%, NA 17%, but there were huge differences in religious practices between the two constituent republics. See Czech Republic and Slovakia. Health, social welfare and housing. After World War II, free healthcare was available to all citizens. National health planning emphasized preventive medicine. Factory and local healthcare centers supplemented hospitals and other inpatient institutions. There was substantial improvement in rural healthcare during the 1960s and 1970s. Mass media. During communist rule, the mass media in Czechoslovakia were controlled by the Communist Party. Private ownership of any publication or agency of the mass media was generally forbidden, although churches and other organizations published small periodicals and newspapers. Even with this information monopoly in the hands of organizations under CSOR control, all publications were reviewed by the government's Office for Press and Information. Sports. The Czechoslovakian national football team was a consistent performer on the international scene, with 8 appearances in the FIFA World Cup finals, finishing in second place in 1934 and 1962. The team also won the European Football Championship in 1976, came in third in 1980 and won the Olympic gold in 1980. The Czechoslovak national ice hockey team won many medals from the World Championships and Olympic Games. Peter Angstrom Jenasna 1/2, Jaromir Jagr, Dominique Horek, Peter Bondra, Petr Klamar, Maria N. Garborake, and Pavel Demitra all come from Czechoslovakia. Emil Zartok, winner of 4 Olympic gold medals in athletics, is considered one of the top athletes in history. Vera Oyaslevska was an Olympic gold medalist in gymnastics, winning 7 gold medals and 4 silver medals. She represented Czechoslovakia in 3 consecutive Olympics. The famous tennis players Ivan Lendl, Miloslav May unregistered trademark, Hana Mandlikova, Martina Hingis, Martina Navratilova and Daniela Hantuchova were born in Czechoslovakia. Culture, Czech Republic/Slovakia, List of Czechs/List of Slovaks, MDA 1/2, Jazz in Dissident Czechoslovakia, Postage stamps, List of people on stamps of Czechoslovakia, Czechoslovakia stamp reused by Slovak Republic after January 18, 1939 by overprinting country and value, timeline. See also, effects on the environment in Czechoslovakia from Soviet influence during the Cold War, former countries in Europe after 1815, Kingdom of Bohemia, 1968 Red Square demonstration, references. References and sources, Czechoslovak Republic at the Wayback Machine, further reading, Heeman, Mary. Czechoslovakia, the state that failed. Herman, AHA History of the Czechs. Calvada, Joseph. The Genesis of Czechoslovakia. Lev, Karol Skolnick. National Conflict in Czechoslovakia, The Making and Remaking of a State, 1918 Euro 87. Manti, Victor. A History of the Czechoslovak Republic. Myant, Martin. The Czechoslovak Economy, 1948 Euro 88. Namak, Norman, and Leonid Jablonka, eds. The Establishment of Communist Regimes in Eastern Europe, 1944 Euro 1949 online edition, Azov, Andrea. Battle for the Castle, The Myth of Czechoslovakia in Europe 1914–1948. Online review, Paul, David. Czechoslovakia, Profile of a Socialist Republic at the Crossroads of Europe. Renner, Hans. A History of Czechoslovakia since 1945. Seaton Watson, RWA History of the Czechs and Slovaks. Stone, Norman, and E. Struwell, eds. Czechoslovakia, Crossroads and Crises, 1918 Euro 88. Wheaton, Bernard. Zdenek Kavav. The Velvet Revolution, Czechoslovakia, 1988 Euro 1991. Williams, Kyron, Civil Resistance in Czechoslovakia, From Soviet Invasion to Velvet Revolution, 1968 Euro 89, in Adam Roberts and Timothy Garter Nash, Civil Resistance and Power Politics, The Experience of Nonviolent Action from Gandhi to the Present. Windsor, Philip, and Adam Roberts, Czechoslovakia 1968, Reform, Repression and Resistance. Walczyk, Sharon L. Czechoslovakia, Politics, Society, and Economics. External links, online books and articles, U.S. Library of Congress Country Studies, Czechoslovakia, English, Orders and Medals of Czechoslovakia including Order of the White Lion, Yuri Andropov to the Soviet Central Committee about the demonstration in Red Square against the Warsaw Pact invasion of Czechoslovakia, September 20, 1968 from Andrei Sakharov's KGB file archived at Yale University. Hungarian language map indicating border changes after the creation of Czechoslovakia. Map.